Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome into the PHLY Phillies podcast. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. And a beautiful, finally, some decent weather, a beautiful Friday afternoon as we get you set for your Memorial Day weekend, a long weekend. We've made it to another end of a week as we celebrate each and every Friday, but this one's special in the fact that you get an extra 24 hours to rest and recover and recuperate and spend some time with your family. What's up, everybody? Hello to everybody in the chat as well. Welcome into the PHLY Phillies podcast, brought to you by our friends over at Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. As always, please, if you are here, hit that like button before you get out of here today. And of course, if you are not subscribed to the channel, we would kindly and humbly ask that you do so. It's free. It takes about a tenth of a second, maybe a little bit more. But it doesn't take much time to subscribe as well, and it helps our numbers, it helps our algorithm, and things like that. So if you're not subscribed to the channel, if you're new, first and foremost, welcome, hello, and thank you so much for checking us out. But if you're not subscribed to the channel, please just drop that like and hit the subscription. You can also get bell notifications for each and every show, or you can customize them to whatever show fits your enjoyment level. So if you are a Phillies fan only, then hit the notification for the Phillies. But I recommend you do it for each and every show because PHLY offers some awesome content. All right, we've got an hour to do things. We have a lot to do. I have a lot that I'm required to do today. So let's jump right into things and right on schedule. Check that out. As we had on Wednesday, the telemarketers are back again. I am going to launch this phone out the 7th floor window because they do nothing but control my life anymore. All right, like I said, we have a lot to do in an hour, so let's jump right into things. We're going to get to the meat of the show in just a little bit, which is the Phillies quarter century team. I'll explain what that means in just a moment. But first, let's talk about the Phillies Rockies series for just a couple of minutes because it was a pretty painless series. It was exactly what you expected from the Phillies and Rockies series. The Phillies sweep out the 4-game set. They've now won 7 consecutive games, and this to me was exactly what they were supposed to do. And in fact, why don't we right off the rip, Joey, I apologize for this, but we have a lot to do today. Let's make this opening segment our big deal segment. The big deal, which is brought to us by our friends over at Cherry Hill Mitsubishi. Listen, I know people buy Mitsubishis elsewhere, but I just don't know why. And that is exactly what our presenting sponsor for today's show is the big deal. Well, not our presenting sponsor, but our sponsor for this segment is the big deal, and brought to you by our friends over at Cherry Hill Mitsubishi. And again, the big deal is that the Phillies are beating the teams that they're supposed to beat. The Phillies are clobbering bad teams, not just this week, but this season. So in the 4-game set against the Rockies, the Phillies scored 27 runs in 4 games. But they were at 25 runs through the first 3 games. They won yesterday's game 2-0. It was a good pitching performance from both Ranger Suarez, and credit to German Marquez. I thought he was good in yesterday's game as well. But Ranger was good and kept the Rockies off the scoreboard for 6 2/3 innings. Then the Phillies bullpen comes in and shuts things down, and they win the game 2-0 for their 7th consecutive win. They also picked up 50 hits in the first 4 games, or in the 4-game series, and had 46 hits through the first 3 games of the series as well. Just 4 hits yesterday for the Phillies. Again, not a particularly strong offensive performance, but it really did feel like it was a getaway day for everybody. The Phillies were headed to Sacramento. The Rockies, meanwhile, were headed on the road as well. I believe they were they were welcoming the New York Yankees to town, so they were getting set for that, but it doesn't really matter. They've lost 42 of their first 50 games. And the umpires were heading back to clown school because they were awful. I mean, the home plate umpire last night was one of the worst home plate, and for both sides, was awful for Marquez, was awful for Ranger Suarez, was one of the worst officiated games I have seen in quite some time. And let me pull up the umpire scorecard real quick while we're here to get you that exact number. The umpire scorecard for yesterday's game, I imagine, would not be very favorable to Jonathan Parra. And in fact, it was actually better than I thought. His overall accuracy was at 94%, but his overall consistency was at 89%. And there were just some really awful calls from behind home plate. But the big deal, again, is that the Phillies took care of business, and they're doing exactly what they're supposed to do against these bad teams. They've now won 7 consecutive games against the Rockies and the Cardinals. They're 7-0 against, the Rockies and the Pirates. They're 7-0 against the Colorado Rockies this year. And if you add the Rockies, the Pirates, the Nationals, and the Tampa Bay Rays together, the Phillies are 19-4 against those 4 teams. A 19-4 record, which is good enough for an 82.6% winning percentage over 23 games against 4 really bad teams. And listen, you could say, I want to see what happens in September. I want to see what happens against the Mets. I want to see what happens in the postseason. And that's a fine assessment to have, especially after how last season ended. But to me, I'm a big proponent. You've heard me say it on this show plenty of times. You play who you play when you play them. And with balanced schedules now in effect for Major League Baseball, everybody is going to get the opportunity to play these teams. The Phillies are 7-0 against the Colorado Rockies. The only other team that has played the Rockies twice this year are the San Diego Padres. They lost 1 game to the Rockies. No, it was 1 game. They have another 10 to go against them. But they did lose a game against the Rockies. The Phillies did not. And then the inverse, which is probably the bigger conversation piece, is that inversely, if the Phillies went 2-2 in this series, if they were 4-3 or even 5-2 against the Rockies over 7 games, people would be frustrated. And you would have a right to be frustrated because the Rockies are god-awful. I mean, this truly might end up being the worst team in the history of baseball. We talked about the White Sox last year being the worst team ever in terms of loss total over 162 games. This Rockies team is on pace to shatter that record. Not just break it, not just surpass it. They are on pace to shatter that record. They are on pace for 27 wins. And I thought to myself when I heard that, there's no way they don't get to 27. There's no way they don't get to 30, right? They're 8-42. And there's I would have to imagine they're going to stack together a run where they win 3 straight. And they go from 8-11 or 14-17 in the course of a weekend. This team, this Rockies team, does not have the capability of sweeping anybody. Their starting pitching's awful. German Marquez was the best starter that we saw in the 4-game set. I thought Kyle Freeland was okay on Monday. Marquez pitched well yesterday, but Antonio Senzatella was terrible. Carson Palmquist was terrible. Their bullpen stinks. Their offense is pathetic. It's lifeless at times. And they scored a bulk of their runs in the series off of Carlos Hernandez. They were shut out yesterday. They didn't really put together much on Monday. And again, Tuesday and Wednesday, when they did score some runs, they were off the Phillies' lower tier relievers, including Carlos Hernandez. This is going to be one of the worst teams I've ever seen, and it might be one of the worst teams ever in the history of baseball. And so the big deal when you're facing historically bad teams like the Rockies are, and the Pirates aren't going to be historically bad, but their offense is pretty putrid itself. The big deal is the fact that you win 7-0 against these teams. The big deal is the fact that you are 19-4 against bad competition. Your schedule is going to balance itself out. The pendulum swings back the other way in June and July. You've got the Braves, you've got the Mets, you've got the Yankees. You're playing some good teams in the months of June and July. It's going to become a much more difficult task to get there. To do this now is to do what you're supposed to do. We talked about on Wednesday the win totals against bad teams in 2022 and last year in 2024. 2022, it was the reason the Phillies made the playoffs, was because they obliterated the Nationals late in the season. They were 16-3 against the Nationals in 19 games in 2022. Last year, they won 64% of their games against teams that were under 500 or below. This year so far, they are well above that number and continue to pace against these bad teams. So what you're doing is creating distance, not against the Mets per se, because the Mets are eventually going to play the bad teams that you're playing now. And I think it's going to be a fight between you and the Mets and the Braves, who are playing much better baseball as of late, for the division and for a wild card spot. But what you're able to do is separate yourself from the average teams and really create some distance between the Cardinals, the Reds, the Brewers, a lot of basically the NL Central that's not the Cubs, and the Pirates who stink. And then you're starting to get that distance between the Diamondbacks, who should be a postseason team. The Padres have played poorly as of late, over the last week or so. You've now been able to create some distance. And now you have a lead in the NL East that at least makes you feel a little bit more comfortable heading into the months of June and July. So that's our big deal segment, brought to you by our friends over at Cherry Hill Mitsubishi. I understand that people buy Mitsubishis elsewhere, but I just don't understand why. And that's our segment for our friends over at Cherry Hill. All right, we're going to get to the bulk of the conversation in just a little bit. But before we do that, let's take a break. Let's pause for just a moment right here on the PHLY Phillies podcast, brought to you by our friends over at Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. All right, Parx Casino, my hometown casino of choice. I've been telling you about that for a while because it's not just a saying for me. It is legitimately my hometown casino. I could get there by the time this ad block is over if I were at my apartment right now. It's a beautiful complex, incredible features, and one of my favorite places to go at the BetParx Casino is the Excite Center. It is one of my absolute favorite choices to see a live performance, whether it's a concert or a comedy event. I love being at the Excite Center because it has big feel with being a smaller venue. It's an intimate setting, about 1,000 seats, but it has big feel. There's not a bad seat in the house. The production value is off the charts between the sound, the engineering, and the lighting. It is an awesome place to go see a live show. And if you're thinking about maybe a date night, you want to get a night out with your friends, whatever the case may be, coworkers, a happy hour after work on a Friday, on a long weekend, BetParx is the place to be because it's not just the Excite Center to go see a show. You have incredible dining options. The Beer Garden, which is an awesome place to sit outside, enjoy a game, and have a couple of beers with your friends, have a couple of drinks with your friends on a Friday afternoon after work or a Sunday afternoon on a long weekend. Parx Casino has absolutely everything that you're looking for. Visit parxcasino.com for all ticketing times for all of your shows. And of course, as I said, you can pregame those shows at the amazing Beer Garden while you play some pop culture, slots, roulette, cards, and other table games that you love while you wait for your show. Parx Casino, this is how you win. Must be 21 and over. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, let me tell you about one of my favorite sponsors here at PHLY because I've been wearing these sunglasses for years now. It's Shady Rays, and no matter what the day, no matter what the temperature, you know if I'm outside, I'm rocking my Shady Rays, whether it's trying to keep the glare off of a car while I'm driving or if I'm on an outdoor adventure, I'm at the ballpark, whatever it might be, I've got my sunglasses on if I'm outside, even on the gloomiest of days. And the reason is because Shady Rays is an incredible company that offers an amazing product. They're an independent sunglass company that offers an unbelievable product that is rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. Durable frames, and more importantly to me, crystal clear optics with polarized lenses that cannot be beat. You're going to find the exact pair, the exact style, and the exact color scheme that you're looking for because they have hundreds of options when you pair all of those things up to make the perfect pair of sunglasses. With so many different colors and options available, you are going to find that pair that works best for you. And if your pair ever takes an unexpected hit or go missing, don't worry about it. They have the best replacement program in all of eyewear. Every pair is backed by a lost or broken replacement. And if you don't love the shades that you buy online, you can return them or exchange them worry-free for up to 30 days. So there is no risk to you when you shop. PHLY viewers and listeners can head on over to shadyrays.com right now and save 35% off a pair of polarized sunglasses with the code PHLY. That's 300,000 people. There's a reason why they've rated it 5 stars, myself included. Head on over to shadyrays.com to find out why and use that promo code PHLY at checkout for 35% off. All right, welcome back to the PHLY Phillies podcast here, brought to you by our friends over at Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. And it's time to get into the big conversation of today's show, which is quarter-century teams. And the reason that I brought this up, the reason that this was the headline of today's show before we had, some bills to pay and things like that, is because Jayson Stark and The Athletic produced a quarter-century team across all of Major League Baseball. So they came up with a starting 9 plus 5 starters and a closer. And this is what it looked like when they were all said and done. This is the MLB all quarter century team brought to you by Jayson Stark, one of the best baseball minds and baseball scribes of all time, but especially in the recent era, and the Athletic. So what they did was factor in the best players at every position, and this is what Jayson Stark came up with. No surprise for a lot of these. Couple that I think that I would change, but let's go through it very quickly before we get to the crux of our conversation today. We'll start with the designated hitter, David Ortiz. Absolutely no problem there. The designated hitter did not come into the National League until very recently, so more than likely you're picking an American League hitter. I think when this is all said and done, when we get to maybe the 50-year mark, that David Ortiz will eventually be replaced by Shohei Ohtani. But for the first 25 years of the century, David Ortiz, no issue there whatsoever. At the first base position is Albert Pujols. Again, no problem there. To me, Albert Pujols is the best right-handed hitter that I have ever gotten to see the game, to personally see with my own eyes. Over 700 home runs. Career is just off the charts. He's going to walk into the Hall of Fame when it's his time to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. And I think he's not only going to walk into the Hall of Fame, I think he's going to walk into the Hall of Fame as a unanimous vote. Second base is an interesting one. They go with Jose Altuve, multiple World Series. He's had an incredible career. This is an opportunity. I think if there was ever a player that was going to be a Philly, I think second base is the best opportunity for a Phillies player to make the list. And because Chase Utley has a strong case in this conversation. I have no issue with Altuve. I think there's a good argument to be made for Chase Utley, but with Altuve being on the list, not a problem. Jeter, no surprise there. Captain America, the Yankees' everyday shortstop for what felt like a billion years. He walked into the Hall of Fame as he should have, over 3,000 career hits. I mean, an all-time Yankee. The number 2 is going to be... Actually, I don't know if the number 2 is already retired. I don't think they've done it yet, but it's going to be retired in the near future. Third base, Adrian Beltre is an interesting one because my immediate thought was that it could have been Alex Rodriguez, but then I factored in, I was actually talking about this with Zach Berman yesterday, I factored in that A-Rod spent a lot of time at short in the early portions of the 2000s between Seattle and in Texas before going to the Yankees and then becoming a third baseman. Adrian Beltre is one of the most underrated players in all of baseball, despite the fact that he was just inducted into the Hall of Fame. He's that good. So really no problem at third base either. Across the outfield, Barry Bonds in left field. This is a no-brainer. Barry Bonds, to me, is the best hitter of my lifetime. Steroids or not, steroid era or not, Barry Bonds is the best hitter, maybe the best player of my lifetime. I was born in 1993. I have seen 30 seasons of baseball, and Barry Bonds still is the best hitter I've ever seen. Mike Trout in center field. I don't have a problem with that one. I think Trout's longevity has, of course, been hindered by his injury history, but Mike Trout was on like Willie Mays trajectories. Mike Trout was being considered like the next Mickey Mantle when he was playing healthy baseball. I have no issue with Mike Trout in center field. You know, there's a couple of guys that maybe you could argue, but at the end of the day, Mike Trout is probably the center fielder. Now, right field is the interesting one. Now, this is one of two, and Pat Ryan brings up the name that I would argue for right field. Aaron Judge was selected as the right fielder for the all-quarter century team. And Aaron Judge is going to go down as one of the greatest hitters to ever play. And that's crazy to say because he's still in his year 33 season. He's still very much in his prime. And somehow he's still getting better as his career goes on. He was a .287 hitter in 2021 when he hit 39 home runs. The following year, 62 home runs. He hit .311. Dip year in 2023, but since then, a .322 average in 2024 where he hit 58 home runs and drove in 144 and had a 1.159 OPS. This year, he's hitting almost 400 as the month of May comes to a close with a 1.23 OPS, and he leads the league in both home run and RBIs. And I know it seems like it's too soon, right? Aaron Judge right now has 331 home runs in his 10-year career. He has 760 RBI, which only comes out to be 76 RBI per season. But you have to take into consideration his first year he only played 27 games, and in 2020 everybody only played 60 games. He's a Hall of Famer. I don't know if he's a Hall of Famer right this second, but he is clearly on a trajectory to become a Hall of Famer. He is unbelievable. If you take his 2021 season through his 2025 season so far, in 618 games, he's hitting .308 with a 1.071 OPS, 212 home runs, and 492 RBI. He's been unbelievable. The issue that I take is not including Ichiro Suzuki on this list. Ichiro, one of the purest hitters I've ever watched play the game, a career .311 average. To me, would have, if he'd have played his entire career in Major League Baseball as opposed to almost 10 years in Japan, would be the hits leader all time, over 3,000 hits, despite not making his debut until he's 27 years old. 7 different times led Major League Baseball in hits, 3 times led Major League Baseball in batting average, MVP in his rookie year, Rookie of the Year, a 9-time All-Star, 10-time All-Star, which feels almost low. But Ichiro, to me, feels like it may be a little bit of a snub on this list. But Aaron Judge is cementing himself as one of the best hitters of the century. And I think when it's all said and done, as I said, he has 331 home runs right now. Aaron Judge is definitively going to get to 500, barring injury, of course. Aaron Judge is definitively going to get to 500. Does he get to 600? He's 33 years old. And right now, as I said, over that pace that we just talked about, the last 4 years that we'll take into consideration, 173 home runs in that stretch. If you stretch it to 5 years, it's 212. He's averaging well over 42 home runs a season. If he hits another 42 for the next 5 years, that's another 200. He clears 500 easily. I think he has an outside chance of getting to 600 home runs, assuming he stays healthy. Ichiro, to me, feels like a little bit of a snub in this regard, but I can't argue it. The one that I would probably argue the most, and this is not a discredit to Yadi. Yadi is one of the best defensive catchers I've ever seen, and the longevity that Yadi caught at and the amount of games that Yadi caught behind the plate for the Cardinals is insane. One of the best defensive catchers I have ever seen play the game. But I think that in terms of the 2000s, because initially I went, well, does Pudge make the list? And Pudge played from 2000 to 2011. But Pudge's best years were in the late 90s. Pudge still was an incredible hitter. From 2000 to 2011, even into his age 39 season, he averaged 293 with a 463 slug, hit over 160 home runs, and had over 1,500 hits from 2000 to 2011. But I think if I'm picking a catcher, it comes down to Buster Posey versus Joe Mauer for me. And Joe, you're good. We can drop the graphic at this point. I appreciate it. Thank you. It comes down to Buster Posey versus Joe Mauer for me. Yadi, again, defensive wizard, one of the best defensive catchers I've ever seen play the game. But you have heard me say on this show, I am the biggest Joe Mauer stan on the planet. I was ready to fight for Joe Mauer into the Hall of Fame tooth and nail if I had to. Now, I didn't have to because he ended up being a first ballot Hall of Famer. But I think that Mauer's numbers offensively carry a lot of weight. And Buster Posey was just as good. And then again, I think the Pudge conversation comes into play, probably best known for his late 90s and early 2000s numbers, but he did play 11 seasons in the 2000s. Yadi's the one to me that I would maybe question. All right, and real quickly before we get to the Phillies quarter-century team and the reason as to why we're here, the 2025 starting pitching group. Anything stand out to you as to who didn't make the list? Because to me, the list is incomplete without Pedro Martinez. I don't know how Pedro Martinez did not make this list. I am of the belief that Pedro Martinez is the best right-handed pitcher I've ever seen. Now, if I were to argue right-handed pitchers, you could talk about Roy Halladay. You could talk about Justin Verlander. Roy Halladay makes this list, no questions asked. He's on this list. I think Justin Verlander's on this list as well. I could talk about Max Scherzer as well, but this list, to me, is not complete without Pedro Martinez on it. Now, I understand that Pedro, again, another guy who maybe his best years came in the late 90s, and that's true. The year he was 23-4 with a 2 ERA, 1990. But from 2000 until 2005, Pedro Martinez was 90-34 with a 2.58 ERA, in which he threw 1,153 innings. He had 1,327 strikeouts. I think this list is incomplete without Pedro Martinez. But the one guy that I was surprised about, and not because of how good he is, but because of how good he was in the 2000s, was Randy Johnson. Because another guy I think about, when I think about Randy Johnson, I think about a guy who pitched his best years in the 1990s. But that almost is simply not the case. He had some unbelievable years in the 90s. But from 2000 until 2004, Randy Johnson won 3 consecutive Cy Youngs, finished second or better 4 straight times. He was hurt in 2003, and won 86 games with a 2.69 ERA and struck out almost 1,500 hitters. And by the way, he did this from his years 36, 37, 38, 39, and 40 years old. In 2004, at 40 years old, Randy Johnson finished 16-14, but went with a 2.6 ERA, struck out 290 hitters in 245 innings, had a .9 whip, and led Major League Baseball in FIP, whip, hits per 9, strikeouts, games pitched, and WAR. Randy Johnson he's a freak, man, like an absolute freak. His years from 1990 to 1999 were really, really, really good. And somehow, statistically, from 2000 to 2005, 2004 really, 2005 is when, but even in 2005, he was 17-8 with a 3.9. From 2000 to 2005, Randy Johnson is one of the best players to walk the planet. 3 consecutive Cy Young Awards from 2000 to 2002, excuse me. In 2002, he struck out 334 hitters. It was the fewest he struck out in any of those 3 years. He won, over those 3 years, he won 64 games and never posted an ERA worse than 2.64. When you think about Randy Johnson, you might think about Mariners Randy Johnson if you're older than me. I'm 31 years old. So when I think of Randy Johnson, I think of Diamondbacks Randy Johnson. That's the first one that comes to mind. And I'm going to say this and you're going to laugh, but this is the reason why. I swear to you it's true. He was unbelievable, and he and Schilling combined for one of the best duo pitching performances in a World Series I've ever seen. But this is the funny part. Randy Johnson, to me, where I remember him as a Diamondback because of backyard baseball. And I know it's silly to say, but it's true. He was a Diamondback in backyard baseball when I was a kid. And so that, to me, I associate Randy Johnson with the Diamondbacks, not just because of his unbelievable tenure there, but also because of backyard baseball. But his 2000s actually statistically were, especially from the first half of the decade, were almost better than the 1990s, which is crazy to say. So I have no issue with that list, with the exception of Pedro's got to be on the list to me. And I think it's a hard choice. It's a hard decision because your retort is, who do you leave off? My initial thought was probably Scherzer, but I love Scherzer. I'm one of Max Scherzer's biggest fans because I don't think I can leave Kershaw off. And Verlander's a 3-time Cy Young and an MVP, and so is Kershaw. I think Kershaw's a 2-time Cy Young and an MVP. I think if I'm choosing who to take off in favor of Pedro Martinez, it would end up being Max Scherzer, but that's a hard choice. And then the closer, we don't have to have the argument. The closer is Mariano Rivera. There's no argument to be had. He's the greatest closer of all time. It's Mariano Rivera. So that's the quarter-century team as presented by Jayson Stark and The Athletic. Now, the reason that I bring this up, and the reason that we're going to get into it in the back half of the show, I came up with my quarter-century Phillies team. We did the same thing. 9 position players, including a DH, which I know is difficult because the DH only came to the National League within the last decade, and 5 starting pitchers. Now, I did not come up with a closer. I think if we did, it would probably be a battle between Brad Lidge's peak versus Jonathan Papelbon or Billy Wagner's more extensive tenures. But we came up with 5 starting pitchers and a starting 9. So on the other side, we're going to do that. We're also going to get into our Ace Hardware temp check at the end of the show. But that is your all quarter century team as presented by Jayson Stark. Who do you think was left off? Well, put it in the comments. I've seen a couple comments already. Drop it in the comments. Who do you think was left off? Who do you think doesn't belong on the list? Who do you think absolutely deserves to be on the list? I'll mention it on the other side before we get to the Phillies conversation. But before we do that, let's pause for just a moment here on the PHLY Phillies podcast and tell you about some of our friends here at PHLY. All right, let's start with TrueMark Financial because it is never too early to start thinking about your savings and especially your savings when it comes to home purchasing. And if you're working from home, it's time to stop calling plays from the couch. With a TrueMark Financial HELOC Select, you can tap into your home's equity and finally make those upgrades that you're thinking about, whether it be a home office or you want to build a better space, you want to build a man cave, if that's what you're looking for. Whatever the case may be, or even if you're just looking to finish a project that you've been putting off, HELOC Select allows you to get great low rates, flexible access, which will allow you to either pull all your funds at once or throughout time when you need them. You'll get lower rates than most personal loans, and there's no penalty if you pay off your HELOC returns early. So head on over to TrueMark.com/PHLY to apply and turn your work from home game into a winning play. Terms and conditions do apply. Visit TrueMark.com/HELOC for details. Federally insured by the NCUA, Equal Opportunity Lender, NMLS 404938. All right, talking about saving money and knowing upfront honest pricing, that's where our friends at Empire Today come in. More on that in just a second. Why is Empire the choice for your flooring? Because they are the flooring experts. They're the pros, and that's all they do. They are the flooring professionals that get the job done, not just quickly, because quick is good, but they get it done right, and you're going to be exactly happy with knowing your upfront pricing. Again, more on that in just a second. They're the flooring experts who are dedicated flooring professionals who focus on flooring every single day. Listen, we've all tried to go to the big box stores that have a flooring department, but the person helping you with flooring may have been doing sinks yesterday or could have been stacking light bulbs the day before. So Empire is the best choice for new floors because they live and breathe floors. Their flooring experts bring the showroom right to your home. They're going to help you pick out the right flooring and the right colors for your space. They'll show you exactly what it looks like in your home. You'll see what your furniture in your house looks like with that new flooring. You're going to get precise measurements taken and have all of your questions answered professionally by those experts, so there's no surprises. Here's where the upfront pricing comes into play. No worries about hidden fees or exclusive costs. You're going to get clear upfront and all-inclusive pricing so you can schedule your installation as soon as the next day. So schedule an in-home estimate today because some things are just better at home, and PHLY listeners can receive $350 discount when they use the promo code PHLY. Once again, a $350 discount when you use the promo code PHLY. Restrictions do apply. Visit Empire today/PHLY for more details. All right, welcome back to the PHLY Phillies podcast. Before we get into the Phillies quarter-century team, I want to say hello to everybody in the chat. Pat Ryan, Molly and Barkley's Life, K-Red, Peel and Onions, John Peace. Hello to everybody. Even Metropoli Jonathans, who continues to run the exact same joke for 2 weeks now, and it's pretty stale. It was kind of clever the first time. I'm not going to lie to you. It was a clever pun on Jose Alvarado's name, but it's the same joke at this point. But anyway, hello to everybody, even our resident Mets fans. So I want to go back to some of the comments that I saw about the all-quarter century team. Pat Ryan says, Joe Mauer has the most games caught in Twins history with 1,100, so he's clearly caught enough. Also, the offense from Mauer puts him over Yachty for me, too. Yeah, I think Mauer would have been my choice. I think I would have gone Mauer, Posey, Molina, and again, I thought I didn't think about Pudge right away, but Pudge probably has a case as well, even though he's probably more 90s than 2000s. But again, he played 11 years in the 2000s. Sean Peace adds, Miguel Cabrera not on this list feels wrong. That's a good one. And I think when you compare the two careers of Miguel Cabrera versus Adrian Beltre, they were two different careers because Beltre obviously a little more pop than Cabrera. Cabrera with just unbelievable bat-to-ball skills for a long, long time. Cabrera's going to be a first-ballot Hall of Famer and absolutely should be. There's no question about it. He was one of the best third basemen of the 2000s. I wonder if the conversation is Adrian Beltre was pretty good, started to fall off, signed a one-year deal in Boston, I believe, rejuvenated his career, and was better as he got older. Now, I think Cabrera has the longevity too, where he was just a stalwart. Like, you could pencil Cabrera in for just about 200 hits. You could pencil Cabrera in for just about a 300 batting average. And you could pencil Cabrera in for somewhere in the 85 to 120 RBI range. Miguel Cabrera from 2004 to 2014 never had less than 105 RBI. He never had less than 24 home runs, and he never had less than 177 hits. He never batted worse than 294 over that stretch, and in fact hit well over 300 in 7 seasons. And when I say well over 300, I mean 330 or better in 7 seasons. John Peace, you might have convinced me. I know Adrian Beltre's a Hall of Famer. I'm surprised it's not Miguel Cabrera. I'm really surprised it's not Miguel Cabrera. If we were to, go on bench spots, I think it would be a fun exercise to do. But let's get to this list. Let's get to the all-quarter century Phillies team. And yes, K-Red, unsurprisingly, there's going to be a lot of players from the 2008 team on this list. All right, so we started in the infield in the quarter century all-MLB team. So let's do the same. Let's start behind the plate. This was an intriguing one for me because there's really only 2 choices. Do you go with the guy that is beloved, or do you go with the guy that has better numbers? And the answer comes down to, is it Chooch or is it JT Realmuto? And my answer to this question is JT. I would take JT Realmuto as the quarter century catcher for the Phillies. Chooch has the accolades, right? World Series champ. He has the distinction of being one of 2 catchers ever to catch 4 no-hitters, the other being Jason Varitek. I think that Chooch is one of the most beloved Phillies of the 2000s. I think JT Realmuto's got him beat in most statistical categories. Now, he's played in 260 less games behind the plate, or 260 less games, period, as a Philly. But he has more home runs, more RBI, more stolen bags, a better slug, and a better OPS. He was also been a 2-time Silver Slugger winner, and he's won 2 Gold Gloves on top of it. Carlos Ruiz was a good defensive catcher. He clearly had the respect and admiration of the pitchers that threw to him. Roy Halladay, raved about Carlos Ruiz. Cole Hamels raved about Carlos Ruiz. All of these guys told you exactly how they feel about Carlos Ruiz, in the sense that they adored this guy as a pitch sequencer, as somebody they trusted behind the plate. JT Realmuto is one of the stalwarts defensively of the last 10 years or so. His pop time alone. When you think about pop time, you think about JT Realmuto. When you use the phrase BCIB, Carlos Ruiz's name never came up. And it's not a disrespect thing to him. There was, as we laid out, a lot of really good catchers in Carlos Ruiz's time. I think the catcher position is worse now than it was when Ruiz was catching, at least from a statistical standpoint. But JT Realmuto had claimed to being the best catcher in baseball for a period of time that included being a member of the Phillies. And as Molly and Barkley's Life points out, the intangible stuff with Ruiz is undeniable. But I think when it comes down to the statistical side of things and the defensive stalwart nature of JT Realmuto, I think Realmuto gets the edge over Chooch. I love Chooch. He's one of my favorite players of all time that played in the Phillies uniform, at least. I think in this case, JT gets the nod behind the plate. Next 3 are actually, I think probably next 4 are going to be really decisively easy. Ryan Howard's your first baseman on the All-Century team. Jim Thome is an excellent player, was not here long enough. Jim Thome's career, if you said who's on the All-Century team or who's on the All-Cleveland organization team, Jim Thome probably makes that list as their first baseman. But Ryan Howard's the obvious choice here. During his peak, Ryan Howard was one of the probably 5 best hitters in all of baseball. He was the 2005 NL Rookie of the Year, 2006 National League MVP. From 2006 to 2009, he averaged 50 home runs per season and 143 RBI. He averaged 198. He hit 196 home runs over that span, which is the best in that time frame. In fact, it's not just the best; it's the best by almost a full season's worth of home runs. Albert Pujols was second in that time frame. He hit 163. Ryan Howard, from 2006 to 2009, hit 33 home runs more than a guy who ended up with 700 for his career. He also led Major League Baseball with 572 home runs 572 RBIs in that stretch. 81 more RBI than the guy that was in second. Same person, Albert Pujols. Albert Pujols, to me, is the definitive best first baseman of the 2000s. Longevity played a significant part in how good he was because he was so darn good for so long. But from 2006 to 2009, Ryan Howard was Albert Pujols' equal in most statistical categories. He was that good. Ryan Howard, I think if he doesn't get hurt, Ryan Howard goes on to probably hit 400 home runs throughout his career. And not only is already considered one of the great Phillies of all time, but would be considered one of the all-time greats in the history of the franchise. He's second most in home runs in Phillies history with 382. He finished top 5 in MVP voting every season from 2006 to 2009. This is an obvious one. Ryan Howard is the Phillies' 2000s quarter-century first baseman. Same could be said for the second baseman, Chase Utley. Chase Utley is the obvious choice here as well. 4 straight Silver Sluggers from 2006 to 2009. Over that stretch, he scored 460 runs. One player had more runs in that time frame. And actually, surprisingly, I was kind of surprised when I saw who this was. It was Hanley Ramirez of the Florida Marlins for that time frame. Chase Utley was second in runs scored. He was top 20 in home runs and RBIs in that time frame, despite the fact he played second base, which was not a position that demanded power. Chase Utley was one of the preeminent power hitting, gaps hitting second baseman of his generation. Only Albert Pujols, again, Albert Pujols is going to continue to come up because he's been that good over the course of his career. Only Albert Pujols had a better WAR from 2006 to 2009 than Chase Utley did. He's sixth most in Phillies franchise history at 233 home runs. And at the time, he was a really good defensive second baseman. Now, Brandon Phillips stood in his way a lot of times in terms of winning Gold Gloves. Brandon Phillips was an excellent defensive second baseman in his own right. But Chase Utley is an undervalued second baseman who probably could have won some Gold Gloves if it weren't for Brandon Phillips standing in his way. Last year, Chase Utley got 39.8% of the Hall of Fame votes. I expect that number to go up next year. I don't think he's going to get in next year, but I do think Chase Utley will eventually be a Major League Hall of Famer, will eventually be a Pro Baseball Hall of Famer. I don't think initially I would have voted for him, but after you take the second look, the deeper dive into his numbers, there's an argument to be made. He was, as I use the word, preeminent. He was like one of the preeminent second basemen of his generation. I think he was maybe being a little bit undervalued initially by the Hall of Fame consideration. But as you look at his advanced metric, as you look at his numbers throughout the years, he's going to continue to grow. And last year he was just shy of 40%. I expect that number to rise probably next year and into the subsequent years. Shortstop, 3 for 3 in obvious ones. It's Jimmy Rollins. Jimmy Rollins was the leader of the 2000s Phillies. He was not just the vocal leader, but he was the catalyst of the Phillies offense and defense for the bulk of the decade. I think he has an outside shot of being a Hall of Famer himself. I think that if you were to ask me who gets in, who more likely gets in between Chase Utley and Jimmy Rollins, I would probably lean Chase Utley based on how the trends are moving in the right direction for Utley. But I think that Jimmy Rollins might have an outside chance as well. 2007 MVP. He's one of 4 players ever to go 20, 20, 20, 20 in a season. 20 doubles, 20 triples, 20 home runs, 20 stolen bags. He and Curtis Granderson actually did it in the same season in 2007. They're 2 of 4 players to ever do that. He's a 4-time Gold Glove winner. He's the Phillies' all-time hits leader, and he's the only player ever. Now, you could say this is a little bit of a cherry-pick stat, but when you start to get to only player ever, there's merit to this conversation. He's the only player ever with 200 home runs, 100 triples, 500 doubles, and 400 stolen bases. 200 home runs, 100 triples, 500 doubles, 400 stolen bases. Think about the history of the game. Guys that were threats, 5-tool players, Willie Mays didn't do it. Mickey Mantle didn't do it. Mike Trout hasn't done it. Guys that were stalwarts of, 3 and 4 tool being 3 and 4 tool type of players, or 5 tool type of players. Ricky Henderson didn't do it. The list goes on and on and on of elite level players that did not hit that threshold. Jimmy Rollins stands alone in that threshold. So whether you think he's a Hall of Famer or not, you can have the argument either way. But Jimmy Rollins is clearly the starting shortstop for the Phillies all-quarter century team. Now, the third baseman was an intriguing one, but I think I ended up settling on what should have been the easy answer, and it's Scott Rolen. Now, Scott Rolen only played in Philly in the 2000s for 2.5 seasons, but I think his stats more than enough warrant him being the decision on this list. In those 2.5 years, plus the half year in St. Louis in 2002, he won 3 Gold Gloves and was a 2002 Silver Slugger. He had 25 or more home runs in all 3 of those seasons, 107 RBIs in 2 of those 3 seasons. And in 2000, to me, he was really just a product of the fact that the Phillies were terrible as to why he only had 87 RBI. He had 26 home runs in 2000. 12 of them were solo home runs. 14 of the games in which he hit a home run, he drove in himself, and that was it, because he had 2 multi-home run games in which he hit 2 home runs and had 2 RBIs. He was driving himself in more than anybody else. He had 87 RBIs for a team that only won 65 games. Scott Rolen defensively was an elite level player while he was here and into his tenure with the St. Louis Cardinals. I understand it was only 2.5 years, but if you pair everybody else up, who are you going to put in his stead? Placido Polanco? Good player, not Scott Rolen. Maikel Franco? No. Pedro Feliz? Again, good player, not Scott Rolen. And now Alec Bohm? Good player, not Scott Rolen. Scott Rolen's the best third baseman of the 2000s for the Phillies, and he only played 2.5 years with them. It's a small list. The pool's not huge to choose from, but I think he is the one that ends up fitting this bill. All right, before we move on, and we get to the outfield and the starting pitching, we still have to hit our Ace Hardware temperature check as well. Let's pause for just a moment and tell you about some of our friends here on the PHLY Phillies podcast. All right, let's start with our presenting sponsor of today's show and every PHLY Phillies broadcast. That is our friends over at Bet365, because whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. And it's the reason as to why 90 million users worldwide have used Bet365, and 780,000 live stream events get viewed each and every year. They are the pioneers of live in-game betting. And it's not just your typical Big Four or soccer worldwide or college sports. You can get access to live in-game betting on over 78 different sporting markets. It's not just the ones you think about. Anything that comes to your mind, you can live in-game bet with our friends over at Bet365. If you would a live in-game bet Monday's Philadelphia baseball game, they weren't looking great early. You would have gotten much better odds than at the start of the game. They ended up cruising to a victory and cruising to a series sweep. And how about this? New users get $150 back in bonus bets when you bet $5, win or lose. Sorry, my Siri was trying to talk to me here for just a second. Sign up, use the promo code PHLY365, deposit $10 and place a bet for just $5 and you get $150 back in bonus bets, whether you win or you lose. You can use those bonus bets on spreads, totals, player props, futures, and so much more. That's why, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 and physically located in PA. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, please call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, Ashley, this is a big one. The Memorial Day sales event is going on now at Ashley, South Jersey, and Philadelphia. Save $100 on every $1,000 that you spend. 10% back every time you spend $1,000. Plus amazing savings on beautiful outdoor furniture. And the best part, this is why we went to Ashley when we bought our bedroom furniture. 60-month special financing. You're going to continue to get amazing local free delivery. They're in and out of your house. They were there for 5 minutes in my house, delivered it. I live on the second floor. It was a difficult delivery. And we have one of those quick, Ross from Friends pivot type landings. They did an excellent job. They were in and out. They were efficient. They were effective. And they did an awesome job. I can't recommend my friends over at Ashley enough. Plus, with your qualifying purchase, you're going to get a free gift. You can save on top brand mattresses. And again, get that free local delivery setup and removal at Ashley, South Jersey, and Philadelphia. Financing with approved credit. Minimum purchase is required. Some exclusions may apply. See store for details. All right, welcome back to the PHLY Phillies podcast, brought to us by our friends over at Bet365. Let's continue the conversation here on the Phillies quarter-century team. We're going to go through the outfield, and then we'll quickly go through the starting rotation if we have time, and we'll do our Ace Hardware temperature check as well. In fact, you know what? Before we get to the Phillies outfield, I'm trying to do this on the fly here, trying to make a business decision, make an executive decision here. If we're going to do our Ace Hardware temp check or our Phillies outfield, let's do our Phillies outfield first, and then we'll do our Ace Hardware temperature check before we get out of here. Let's start in left field. And this one ended up being a pretty obvious choice as well. It's the fourth member of the 2008 World Series team. It's Pat Burrell. As much as I love Raul Ibanez, I was a huge Raul Ibanez fan. I think it has to be Pat Burrell in this instance. He played over 1,300 games in 9 regular seasons for the Phillies, which tells you that he played over 145 games on average per season. He was a consistent in the order, whether he was hitting 4th or 5th. He was just, you knew Pat Burrell was going to be in the lineup more times than not. 6 of his 9 seasons, he hit 25 or more home runs. He had 85 or more RBI in 6 of his 9 years as well. He hit 95 4 times in that 9-year tenure. I just think he was as consistent of a hitter as you could get. You knew exactly what you were going to get from Pat Burrell each and every year. Mid to high 20 home runs, 80 to 100 RBI. He was going to do that silly Pat Burrell bat over the head, bail out of the way of a breaking ball that ends up being over the heart of a plate for a strike. Wasn't a good defender, but he was, there. He tried. You knew what you were getting out of him defensively. But I think offensively, he was a key piece for the run that the Phillies made, and culminating in a World Series where he missed a home run in his final at bat as a Philly by mere inches. Settles for the double, ends up getting pinch run for game-winning run, comes across the plate, and Pat Burrell was about as stalwart as you could ask for from a guy who had a lot of weight on his shoulders. First of all, he was the number 1 overall pick. There's enough weight on your shoulders right there. But on top of it, he had to follow up the J.D. Drew fiasco. And so maybe Pat Burrell never became the number 1 pick you were hoping for. Maybe he didn't become a 5-time All-Star, a 4-time Silver Slugger. But Pat Burrell was a consistent as you could get hitter. And to have the weight of the world on his shoulders the way that Burrell did, I couldn't ask for much more from the guy. Again, 25-ish home runs a year, 90-ish RBI, going to hit about 260. And you knew what you were getting, whether he was hitting 4th or 5th in the lineup. You knew what you were getting from Pat Burrell. All right, let's add to the ever-growing list of 2008 World Series members as we go to center field. And this one's Shane Victorino. The center field was a weird position for the Phillies because they cycled through 2 players that were pretty good between Doug Glanville and Shane Victorino and Aaron Rowand and Kenny Lofton. But they ended up making Shane Victorino the everyday center fielder in 2000, I believe it was 2007, but it was definitively by 2008 that Shane Victorino was the everyday center fielder for the Phillies. A Rule 5 pick in 2004. I mean, you can't ask for much more than a Rule 5 pick. He was the everyday center fielder actually in 2000. It was actually the everyday right fielder, in 2006. And then in 2007, I believe was the year that he moved into 2008 was the year he moved into the everyday center fielder. He was the everyday right fielder in 2007 as well. But, you aren't asking for much from a Rule 5 pick. You're asking for them to stay on the roster. He gave you so much more than that. He spent 2005 to 2011 with the Phillies, and I think he really became like a staple both offensively and defensively. He hit 282 in his tenure with the Phillies. He won 3 Gold Gloves. He was a 2-time All-Star. And I think most importantly for Shane Victorino, his contributions were felt the most in the postseason. He drove in 30 runs in 46 games as a member of the Phillies in the postseason, 4 of which were the biggest swing of his career, came off of CC Sabathia in the NLDS against the Milwaukee Brewers. And we all know about the, Brett Myers at bat and leading up to that and whatnot. Shane Victorino, to me, is the stalwart center fielder because after that, it was kind of a turnstile of center fielders. You're talking about Johan Rojas and Brandon Marsh now. Before that, Mickey Moniak and Matt Vierling. Before that, the guy who wore number 37. Before that, it was a hodgepodge of different players that you were trying to figure out who was going to be the center fielder. And Shane Victorino was that dude. Whether he hit second or fifth or sixth or seventh in your lineup, you could bounce him anywhere in the lineup and feel comfortable that he was going to give you quality at-bats and play you really solid Gold Glove type defense. And Molly and Barkley's life brings it up, and it's why I brought up the 30 RBIs in 46 postseason games. Clutch is the word to use when it comes to Shane Victorino. So he's the pretty easy decision in center field for the Phillies. Right field was a hard one for me because right field, this is no disrespect to Bobby Abreu. Bobby Abreu, I think, has unbelievable that he was on those teams because from 1998 to 2005, Bobby Abreu hit .305 and played in 500 more games as a member of the Phillies than the guy that I ended up choosing. And the guy that I ended up choosing is eventually going to be known as a first baseman more than he is a right fielder. But for now, he's played more games at right field than he has at first base. And of course, it's Bryce Harper. Bryce Harper, I think, has to make the list despite the fact that he, again, eventually will be a first baseman. He's played 227 games and counting at first. He played about 350 games in right field for the Phillies. He has just 27 less home runs and 260 less RBI as a member of the Phillies, despite the fact that, compared to Bobby Abreu, despite the fact that Abreu has 500 more games played and over 2,000 more plate appearances. Due in part because Abreu really never got hurt. Harper's been hurt throughout his tenure a little bit as a Philly. And also in 2020, the Phillies only played 60 games because of the COVID-shortened season. But Harper's impact to me, I think, is immeasurable both on and off the field. On the field, he's a 2021 MVP. He's a 3-time Silver Slugger. He's gone from being an everyday right fielder to having to be a DH to being an everyday first baseman that I think doesn't go understated or shouldn't be understated because moving to first base, he's actually been one of the best defensive first basemen in all of baseball. I think he has an opportunity now that Christian Walker is in the American League to win a Gold Glove this year at first base. I think he's that good defensively, and I never expected that to be the case. But to me, Bryce Harper is the answer, not just for his regular season numbers, but because of his postseason heroics, especially in 2022 when the Phillies went to the World Series. As a member of the Phillies, Bryce Harper is hitting .325 with a 1.153 OPS in the postseason. He is one of the most clutch postseason hitters the Phillies have ever had in what is admittedly a small sample size for a franchise that's been around for almost 140 years, but he's one of the most clutch hitters in Phillies history in the postseason. But I think his off-the-field stuff is just as important to the Phillies' success. He has been the ultimate Phillies recruiter. He's almost played GM. He's almost been the GM of the Phillies over the last couple of years. Since Bryce Harper signed in 2019, and right before Bryce Harper signed, the Phillies traded for JT Realmuto. Since the Phillies signed Bryce Harper in 2019, here are some of the big-time moves that they have made. They've signed Zach Wheeler. They've signed Trey Turner. They've signed Kyle Schwarber. They've signed Nick Castellanos. They've traded for Jesus Luzardo. They re-signed Zach Wheeler. They re-signed Aaron Nola. They extended Christopher Sanchez and spent countless amounts of dollars to do those things. 8 moves that are just the big-time moves. They've made other moves as well. Traded for Carlos Estevez. Didn't work out, but they made the move that we're willing to make. They've signed other players as well. But those 8 moves are all big-time money moves that the Phillies have made over the last couple of years. The Phillies are going to extend Jesus Luzardo at some point in the next year and a half. Do they extend Ranger Suarez? I don't know. I lean no. But the Phillies have been willing to spend money and have been willing to bring in players to help make this organization a success. And I think in large part that is due to pitchman to recruiter Bryce Harper. And so to me, while he eventually will be a first baseman, and then we can argue Howard versus Harper when Harper's career is all said and done, right now Bryce Harper still to me is the quarter century right fielder for the Phillies. All right, before we go any further, we are going to pause for just a moment. I want to say thank you to all of our viewers on our streaming platforms, our Roku, our Samsung, all of our streaming platforms. Thank you so much for joining us. Head on over to allphly.com to join the rest of the show because it is officially time for overtime. All right, welcome into the overtime portion of the PHLY Phillies podcast. One day we'll get this be extra innings, but for now, it is the overtime portion. I want to tell you who our DH is, and then, I'm sorry, I think, we're going to hold this for an extended video. We're going to hold the starting rotation for another video. But we still have the Ace Hardware temperature check to get to, so let's tell you who our DH is. I saw it in the chat. There's no surprise here. The DH hasn't been around that long in the National League, and quite frankly, even if it was, it's Kyle Schwarber. Kyle Schwarber is like the catalyst of this team. I've used that word a billion, zillion, trillion times when it's describing Kyle Schwarber. He is the catalyst of this team, and he's the DH choice for two obvious reasons. Again, the DH hasn't been around that long in the National League, and I think right now it might be fair to say Kyle Schwarber is the Phillies' best hitter. Bryce Harper has been hot. Trey Turner's been excellent. Alec Boehm is swinging a better bat. But I think this year, Kyle Schwarber's been the Phillies' best hitter. And quite frankly, Kyle Schwarber might have been the Phillies' best hitter last year as well. Molly and Barkley's Life, have an excellent holiday weekend. We'll talk to you on Wednesday live. Thanks so much for checking us out. Kyle Schwarber's the DH. I don't really need to go into too much detail. 148 home runs as a member of the Phillies. He just hit his 300th career home run. He's getting better and better and better. His two-strike approach has vastly improved. His numbers against lefties are off the charts good the last two seasons. This is a no-brainer. Kyle Schwarber is the DH for the Phillies quarter century team. All right, as I said, we're going to do the Phillies starting rotation in a separate video that will drop on Monday for you since we don't have any live shows on Monday due to the holiday weekend. The Phillies starting rotation one will be the separate video. But before we get out of here, we have to do this. They've paid for the segment. I want to give them their time. Let's do our Ace Hardware temperature check, where we check in on a Phillies player that is either heating up or cooling down, brought to you by our friends over at Ace Hardware, because they're not just the place with the helpful hardware folks, they are the place with the helpful hardware home service team. Let's check in on who's heating up today, and that is over the course of the month of May, Alec Boehm. Alec Boehm has been substantially better in the month of May than he was in the month of April. His start to the season was about as putrid as it possibly could get. There was talks about benching Boehm in favor of Edmundo Sosa or in favor of making a trade. There was talks about Alec Boehm, being traded for basically pennies on the dollar. And the conversation was true. Like this offseason, Alec Boehm's name did come up in trade talks. There's no question about it. But I think in this scenario, they didn't find the right trade partner to make a deal with. And so Alec Boehm was back and had a lot of pressure on him. And the early month plus was not kind to Alec Boehm. Now, we talked about him being an unlucky hitter, but the numbers were dreadful. But Boehm's been much better in the month of May, and it's why he's the heating up Ace Hardware temp check member today. He's hitting .333 in the month of May. He has just 2 less hits in May than he did in all of April, despite the fact that he has nearly 48 less at-bats throughout the first 23 days of the month. He's going to smash his hit total in May compared to what he did in April. His on-base percentage has skyrocketed this month as well, and no surprise, his slugging and his OPS have gone up as well. He has 1 hit or more. He has at least a hit in 16 of his 19 games in the month of May. To add to that, he's scored 7 runs and driven in 10 in the month of May as well. So if you put all of his hits together, which totaled 23 over the first 19 games, 17 RBI and runs combined, he has either 40 hits, RBI, or runs scored through the first 19 games he's played in the month of May. Alec Boehm's bat has been much better in May than it was in April. You could see the approach is better. You could see he's in a little bit of a better headspace. He's driving the ball to both gaps. He's going opposite field when he needs to. He's continuing to square to hit the ball hard. And I think Alec Boehm's month of May is deserving of our Ace Hardware temperature check because he is the one that is heating up. That's our Ace Hardware temp check where we check in on who's heating up or who's cooling down for the Phillies over the course of the week. And that's the end of our show. Thanks so much for hanging out with us today. Really appreciate you joining us on this Memorial Day weekend. To everybody in the chat, Filthy McNasty, K-Red, John Peace, Molly and Barkley's Life, Provolone John, Will, earlier in the show, I think we had Pat Ryan. Who else did we have earlier in the show? Peeling Onions, our resident Mets fan. You know, you can still come around. Just hit the like button on your way out. To everybody in the chat, thank you so much for being here. To Joey for producing today's show. Excellent work by him as well for producing today's show. Head on over to the PHLY Eagles show. It's live now, 2 to 3. And then the PHLY Sixers show will wrap up our Friday festivities from 3 to 4. Please be safe this weekend. Enjoy your extended weekend. Enjoy your Monday off. Have a blast. Enjoy your Memorial Day weekend, whether you're headed to the shore or up the mountains or you're just having a cookout in your backyard. I'm going to echo what John Marks echoed earlier in the morning. Ride shares are easily accessible. You can get in on all of that, whether you do Uber or taxi or Lyft. Please be safe. Please be smart. Please do not get behind the wheel if you are enjoying adult beverages. Enjoy your weekend. Have a great time, but be safe. And we'll talk to you live on Wednesday, but we'll have a video for you on Monday. Enjoy your Memorial Day weekend. I'll talk to you on Tuesday for another recorded video. We'll talk to you live on Wednesday at 1 o'clock as we check in. Maybe we'll check in with Bob Cooney on Wednesday since we don't get the opportunity to chat with him on Monday. We'll try to facilitate a conversation with Jim Salisbury as well, and we'll get you set for the week ahead coming up. So big thank you to everybody in the chat. Big thank you to Joey for producing today. Enjoy your holiday weekend, and we will see you live right here at 1 o'clock on Wednesday on the PHLY Phillies podcast. See ya.
We all silly like the mayor.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.